Survival horror is often regarded as a more modern genre. However, its roots date back to the earliest days of gaming. 1972. Magnavox launched the Odyssey, and of the system's first 12 games was Haunted House, which had players searching around a mansion collecting items and dodging ghosts. 1982. Atari introduced their own version of Haunted House for the Atari 2600. It played similarly to its Odyssey counterpart, but was a huge leap in graphics. 1989. Released as a movie tie-in, Capcom's Sweet Home challenged terrified Famicom owners to guide 5 characters through a haunted mansion, each of whom had different abilities for solving puzzles. 1992. Alone in the Dark by Infogrames brought survival horror into 3D, with polygonal characters walking on 2D pre-rendered backgrounds. It set the standard for most future survival horror games. 1996. What started out as a remake of Sweet Home ended up being one of Capcom's biggest franchises. Though not the first of its kind, Resident Evil would go on to popularize the genre, becoming a powerhouse on the PlayStation and in the industry, and introducing the genre to millions of gamers around the world. Around the same time as the genre was blowing up in popularity, Electronic Arts was moving to Redwood Shores, California. Over the years, the company had exploded in size, from acquiring big studios like MAXIS and Origin Systems, to forming their own, such as EA Sports. One of these studios was EA Redwood Shores, founded in 1998. Though the studio's first game was Future Cop LAPD, EA would have them primarily work on licensed games such as Tiger Woods PGA Tour, James Bond 007, The Lord of the Rings, and The Godfather. However, by 2005, another game had taken the studio by storm. In January of that year, Capcom released the 4th entry in the Resident Evil saga. Its gameplay and atmosphere was unlike anything they had seen, and brought back an old concept. Since the early 2000s, the developers had thrown around ideas for a second sequel to System Shock, but were turned down. Seeing Resident Evil 4 in action gave them a renewed interest in exploring survival horror again, but as a new IP. Development began in the spring of 2005, however, it would be a whole year before EA would greenlight the prototype. Once they were given the go-ahead, Redwood Shores was given an extra 3 months of work. The vertical slice was developed on the original Xbox and comprised of 3 rooms full of moving objects and dim lighting. It also served as a way to figure out the game's mechanics. After 18 months of development and an aggressive internal PR campaign, EA greenlit the project and development began in the summer of 2006. During pre-production, the game was called Rancid Moon and was set on a space prison inspired by Escape from New York, but was changed to a space mining facility. The team wanted to establish the world first so as to have something to build the game around. They took inspiration from gaming contemporaries like Silent Hill and Half-Life to films such as Event Horizon, Alien, Solaris, Sunshine, and Martyrs. Writing duties were handled by 3 people: Warren Ellis, Rick Remender, and Anthony Johnston. Ellis set the backstory and main plot, with additional scenes and dialogue written by Remender and Johnston. According to director and series creator Glenn Schofield, the development team established 5 basic rules. The game must have no HUD, a silent protagonist, dismemberment, interactive cutscenes, and innovation in everything. Their essential goal was to make the scariest game ever made. To cut down on development time, the studio used the same engine for the Godfather game, with physics handled by Havok. At the beginning, the project was going smoothly. Most of the game's mechanics were figured out, and the dev team had completed 11 levels in just a span of 10 months, but it would almost come to a screeching halt. During development, they had the idea for a part where the player was dragged down a hallway by a giant tentacle. Initially, it would have been an instant death, but it was decided to make it a killable enemy. However, what was meant to be a short segment took longer to make, as the team had to rework most of the shooting mechanics and animations. Anywhere from 15 to 20 people worked on the drag tentacle, requiring some content to be cut just to include it. The soundtrack was composed by Jason Graves, with sound design handled by Don Vecca and his team. The game utilized a fear emitter that would change music and sound effects to fit the player's actions. Several of the sound effects were pulled from various human and animal sources, one of which was a horrible screeching noise recorded from the Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART for short. The game was officially announced on September 24, 2007, as Dead Space. The following year, it made its appearance at E3, where it was nominated for several awards and won Best Action Game for the Xbox 360. Dead Space launched in North America on October 13, 2008 for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, followed by the PC version a week later. The 360 version came in a standard and ultra limited edition, which included a DVD of the animated film Dead Space Downfall, a making of DVD, art book, USG Ishimura patch, lithographs signed by Ben Templesmith, the graphic novel adaptation, and a postcard signed by Glenn Schofield, of which only 1,000 copies were produced. It launched in Australia on the 23rd and Europe on the 24th.
Isaac, it's me. I wish I could talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. I wish I could just talk to someone. It's all falling apart here. I can't believe what's happening.
Dead Space takes place in the year 2508. After the depletion of Earth's natural resources, humanity nearly went extinct from war and environmental collapse. To solve Earth's problems, the Concordance Extraction Corporation, or CEC, developed a new process for resource collection called planet cracking. It involved massive mining ships to strip deserted planets of their resources piece by piece. The first of these class of ships was the USG Ishimura, built in 2446 and considered one of the best in her field. During a routine mining expedition at Aegis 7, contact with the Ishimura was lost. The CEC sent out the USG Kellyan on a mission to re-establish contact and fix the Ishimura's broken communications array. The crew consisted of only 5 people: Chief Security Officer Zach Hammond, Computer Specialist Kendra Daniels, Pilot Corporal Chen, Co-Pilot Corporal Johnston, and Engineer Isaac Clarke, the game's protagonist. Clarke had taken on the mission after receiving a scrambled distress message from his girlfriend and Senior Medical Officer Nicole Brennan. While trying to hail the Ishimura, the Kellyan was struck by an asteroid and crashed into its flight deck. The crew survived, but their ship was damaged and stranded on a seemingly deserted Ishimura. It didn't take long to learn they weren't alone, and were attacked by something unearthly. Isolated from the crew, Isaac found himself running from the monster to a nearby elevator and a new nightmare. Though it heavily borrowed gameplay from Resident Evil 4, slight changes like walking while aiming and more melee options let it stand out from its inspiration. Instead of a traditional HUD, all of Isaac's vital information was located on the back of his suit, and ammo count on every weapon. Navigation could be decided 2 ways: the map function or by the press of a button showing you a blue line pointing to your next destination. Though there was a pause function, your inventory map and data screens were separate and in-game. Players had to decide when and where to check their menu, as enemies could still attack. The walking body horrors known as Necromorphs were the real star of the show. They would keep track of where Isaac was going to jump out of air vents at a moment's notice. They came in a variety of shapes and sizes. Each were designed with various abilities, from crawling on walls, fast reflexes, or even turning corpses into necromorphs. In an interesting twist, the only way to kill them was by dismemberment. Headshots never worked, as their vital points were located in one of their various limbs. Of course, you needed an arsenal of weapons to fend them off, and Dead Space took a unique approach. Instead of traditional weapons such as assault rifles and shotguns, most of the weapons were designed as various mining tools, each with varying firepower and abilities. Plasma cutters could switch between vertical and horizontal shots. Line cutters allowed for a wider beam. The Ripper used hovering saw blades. The Force and Contact Beam hit enemies with blasts of energy. More traditional weapons like the flamethrower left enemies crispy, and the pulse rifle could take out smaller enemies. If hordes of necromorphs didn't kill you, the environment would. Portions of the ship breached by the vacuum of space challenged players to solve puzzles before their oxygen ran out. Some areas had zero gravity, allowing Isaac to walk on walls and ceilings, though if not done correctly, Isaac could accidentally be ejected into the vastness of space. Isaac's suit was also equipped with several abilities. Kinesis allowed players to carry or move various objects for certain puzzles. Stasis could be used to slow down moving objects. It came in handy for malfunctioning doors and stopping enemies for easy kills. Health stasis air recharges and ammo could be found in lockers around the ship, bought at stores or dropped by enemies. You could also find nodes, which open your weapons and suit to various upgrades. There were a limited amount of nodes, so players had to choose which upgrades were more important. Nodes could be installed at workbenches found throughout the ship.
What in God's name is going on down there?
I think that's precisely the point, Doctor. God's work.
Most of the game's backstory was told through various audio and text logs left behind by the former crew. 2 months prior, the colony on Aegis 7 discovered a large sculpture called a marker. Due to its uncanny resemblance to another marker found on Earth 200 years prior, news of its discovery reached the Church of Unitology, a shady religious organization who believed the marker was left by an alien race that created humanity, and worshipped Dr. Michael Altman, the man who revealed its existence to the world. The Church ordered high-ranking crewmen in the CEC to take the Ishimura on expedition to Aegis 7 and retrieve the marker. However, when they got there, the colonists were nearly insane and delusional. Once loaded, the same madness infected the crew, and those that died were reanimated as the deadly creatures roaming the ship. Of the 1,332-member crew, only 3 appeared to have survived. Nicole occasionally contacted Isaac and helped him out several times. Chief Science Officer Dr. Terrence Kyne had survived by going into hiding after accidentally killing Captain Benjamin Matthias. Kyne sabotaged parts of the Ishimura to prevent the marker and Necromorphs from leaving the planet. Other than the marker's offspring, Dr. Chalice Mercer served as the game's human antagonist. Driven to fanaticism by the Necromorph outbreak, he believed that they were sent by God as the next stage of human evolution and the way to immortality. His experimentation with Necromorphs led to the deaths of 2 other survivors and his own creation that could regenerate, making it impossible to kill by conventional means. Though Mercer would be a willing victim of a Necromorph, quick players could put him out before his transformation was complete. As the crew of the USG Kelly continued their investigation of the ship, Hammond ordered everyone to evacuate, though he would be killed before that happened. Kendra had learned that the Ishimura's executive shuttle was still in its hangar, but missing parts required to be operational. Dr. Kyne offered to help them and leave the marker on Aegis 7, but just as Isaac had loaded the ship, Dr. Kyne was killed and the shuttle departed, revealing to be the work of Kendra. As it turned out, she was sent by EarthGov to retrieve the marker, and it wasn't of alien design, but created by a precursor of EarthGov 200 years prior. After successfully reverse engineering the marker found on Earth, the red marker was placed on Aegis 7 as an experiment to see how it affected the environment. When the CEC began mining operations on the planet, it reawakened a being created by the marker called the Hive Mind and affected everyone stationed there. Though Isaac was stranded, he received help from Nicole to recall the shuttle with Kendra ejecting before arrival. The two then set off to Aegis 7, where Isaac returned the marker to its pedestal. Despite calming the Hive Mind, it didn't last, as Kendra returned to reclaim the marker. She also revealed that Nicole had been dead the entire time, and his visions of her were hallucinations induced by the marker. Before Kendra could get away, she was killed by the Hive Mind, and Isaac had to fight the creature in one final battle. Once the behemoth was destroyed, Isaac immediately took the shuttle and safely left as a chunk of the planet the Ishimura was carrying headed on a collision course with the planet. Upon completion, a new Game Plus option opened up, allowing players to go through the story a second time with their items and upgrades intact and purchase several DLC suits, only available in the 360 and PS3 version. Dead Space scored high praise from critics for its gameplay and atmosphere, though many felt the story was lacking. However, its sales were considered disappointing, selling less than 200,000 copies within its first month, and reached 1 million by February of 2009. Its lower sales are attributed to coming out at the same time as bigger titles such as Saints Row 2 and Fallout 3. In fact, according to NPD, of the top 10 best-selling games of October 2008, Dead Space was the only new IP. Despite this, Dead Space won several awards, including Action Game of the Year at BAFTA and DICE Awards, and is generally considered a modern classic of survival horror. Next week, we continue our descent into the madness of the Marker, as Isaac Clarke returns 3 years later to face the nightmare again in Dead Space 2.